University of Houston sideline analyst Jeremy Branham with us on 365 Sports. Media Days, of course, in the Big 12 coming up next week in Vegas, which means it's the new conference. It's been that week for a lot of different conferences. Jeremy celebrating either incoming or what. Your thoughts about the new Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma and the incoming schools for the Pac-12?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited about the Corner Four, as they're calling it. I think that there's an opportunity long term for a school to step up and to be a dominant team or two dominant teams in the league. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun with the new addition, the new schools. And long term, yeah, I think there's going to be, a blue blood that steps up that we don't know who it might be yet.
Do you feel like that will be like in rotation? There might be a surge from 2 or 3 programs, 4 programs, because the Big 12 in the past, Baylor in 21, TCU made that great run in 22. Or do you feel like there will be 2 or 3 that set themselves to a higher standard?
I think it'll be both. I think you're going to have a combination of, a team or 2, maybe even 3, where they step up in any given year and it's cyclical. And then I also think that you're going to get at least one school that steps up and is the dominant school. Utah's positioned pretty good right now. I think that Baylor long-term is another school that, the recruiting pipelines that they have. I think Houston could potentially do it. Obviously, I'm biased when it comes to Houston. But I think it'll be both. I think there's going to be 1 or 2 programs that kind of take over. They're the program in the Big Ten. I'm talking long-term. I'm talking 5, 7, 10 years. I'm not talking the immediate. I think we'll see that. I think we'll see a team program, maybe even 2, that step up, kind of take over the league where they're always a contender. Maybe they don't win it every year, but they're always a contender. But then because of the depth of the league, and I think there's a lot of really quality programs too, I think you do see 2 teams a year that are, okay, this is our best year in the next 5. So we see that rotation of really dominant teams paired with teams who are having great seasons. And I think that's what's going to make the league fun, is that it's going to be unknown. Like you don't go into a year saying, okay, this is the team that's going to win every single year. So I think the parity is going to be good. I think it's going to be fun watching the long-term growth of these universities. I can't wait.
So what have you seen? What's the difference in what you've seen bringing in Willie Fritz, of course, with his great resume throughout his career, then most recently to Lane? What are the differences so far?
I think the passion and the energy. Fritz, whenever you bring him in and you see some of the national reaction, it's very positive. Anybody that spends some time with Fritz, it's, this guy's going to bring energy. He's going to bring passion. He's going to coach you. He's going to coach you hard. So it certainly has been positive for the program. People are getting excited for Willie Fritz, and the early recruiting. He's positioned the Houston recruiting to one of the best classes they've had since they've kept track of recruiting. So he's hitting the recruiting grounds hard, which excites the fan base. He's won everywhere he's been. I think the criticism for Fritz, whenever you look nationally to whenever he was hired or whenever he was in the coaching cycle, and it's his age. But you wouldn't guess that. I mean, you see him on the practice field. You see him around campus. You don't see him as much in the summer right now. But he's full of energy. He's got a lot of enthusiasm. So any fear of that has been alleviated within the fan base.
And I know I've seen that about his age. But when we've had him on our show, our interactions, I don't even think that way. I mean, you're right. He is absolutely like full throttle. I use that term probably too much, but very focused, locked in and full throttle. So how much do you feel like he and the others around the offensive staff can help a very talented young man in Donovan Smith, but he also does tend to throw the ball to the wrong people too much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you kind of said it there. He's going to have to take better care of the football. There was times that he was very careless with the football. Whenever he came from Texas Tech, that was a knock on him. Houston saw that too. They played Donovan Smith whenever he was at Texas, and he gave him the ball a couple of times. He can be inaccurate at times. He can be careless with the ball at times, and I think it starts there. Hey, protect this thing. This thing is very important. We need this. We need the football. So I think it starts there. They're going to have to, improve in that area with him. I think he will be too. He didn't really participate a whole lot in spring practice coming off a shoulder surgery, but he did everything that he could. He was in there in the huddles. He was at the practices. He was getting used to the helmets with the new communication device, which is being implemented in college football. So I think it starts there, protecting the ball. I think if you look at what Fritz did at Tulane with Pratt, made him an NFL quarterback who wasn't highly recruited. He was kind of an underdog coming into college and turned into an NFL quarterback. So Fritz and his staff have the reputation to develop players. I wish they would have had Smith for his entire career, not just one. But I do expect a pretty big leap. And to your point, I think it starts with protecting the football.
It was Dana last year in the first year in the Big 12, which Houston had been wanting to do that, get back into an autonomy conference, and they had the opportunity. But he's now gone. Fritz takes over. What do you think Houston as a football program, even with the transition at head coach and staff, what did they learn that can help them the second year in the Big 12?
That's a good question. I think it starts with the recruiting, quite honestly. I think it's a step up. You look at last year's roster, there's some good players. I mean, you had Golden on last year's team who transferred to Texas. We just talked about Smith, who was at Texas Tech. They had some good football players, but I think it's the overall depth. The overall depth of having P4, I guess we're calling it now, players throughout the roster. Because, your starting 22 might be good enough, but all of a sudden, it's football, so there's going to be injuries, and you have to plan for injury, because if you wouldn't, that would be foolish. So you have to have the depth throughout the roster. You can't just go 22 deep with a Big 12 roster. You have to be 50 deep. You have to be 60 deep. That way you're prepared for the injuries. And at the same time, you try to groom some of the younger players to turn into starters. I think it would start there, and trying to build a deep roster. And then secondly, just each and every week, there aren't letdowns whenever you're playing football at that level. And not to talk down about the American, but maybe there were in those other leagues where, 2 to 3 weeks a year, here are tough games. And then the other ones, not that you're taking an opponent lightly, but it's not as difficult a game. I don't think you can do that in the Big 12, because even the lesser teams in the league have really good football players. Even the lesser teams in the league are capable of beating you any given Saturday. So there's no layups in the league in building a deeper roster, I believe.
Donovan Smith's name gets brought up because he's the trigger man. Manjack, among some others. Is there a player or two that you kind of think are overlooked that you feel like maybe deserve a little bit more attention?
I think the receiving core is going to be good, even with the loss of Matthew Golden, who transferred to Texas. I still think that the depth at the receiver position is going to be very good. I don't think they're going to take a step back. Samuel Brown transferred too, but I like what they have there. The name I would specifically mention is Parker Jenkins. Came into the mix a little bit last year, got hurt a little bit, dinged up a little bit. But when he had opportunity, he was very good. And the previous staff was bullish on Parker Jenkins. This staff, bullish on Parker Jenkins. Parker's actually doing a visit at the White House. They're having some initiative right now. So he's up there at a great student, great ambassador for the university, and I think he's going to take off. Showed incredible flashes last year as a freshman. I think he's bound to have a terrific season and a terrific career. He'd be the name that I would mention there. He's a name to look for.
Okay, Jeremy Branham, again, sideline analyst for the University of Houston football radio broadcast. They have Oklahoma in week 2. There's been a history with OU, and so that UNLV to start with, but then at Oklahoma, your thoughts about that test in week 2?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Dana Holgerson's first game was actually against Oklahoma, so it's ironic that they're on the schedule again for Willie Fritz's second game going to Norman. It's going to feel like Big 12 football, right?
Yeah.
Oklahoma leaves the league, and you're playing Oklahoma in the second week. I'm looking forward to that trip. My wife's from Norman, actually, so that'll be fun selfishly for me, going up there to visit some of her family and going up there. But it'll be a challenge. It'll be a test. How much, what's the bar in year 1 of Willie Fritz? That's for each individual person to answer. I think that you need to give him a runway. I think you need to give him opportunity 2, 3, 4 years to really build this team up. Oklahoma is one of the finer programs in the entire country. It'll give us the feel of where they're at in Fritz's first year. I remember Tulane went into Norman a few years ago when Fritz was there. And I think it was a last possession game. I think it was even the Hurricane year when Tulane didn't really have a good season because they were displaced because of the hurricane, and they still went in there and almost beat them in the first game of the year. So, Fritz has a little history there. Houston certainly has the history. Last game was not the best for Houston. But, of course, everybody remembers the NRG game and beating Baker Mayfield and having the kick six return, Brandon Wilson, 109 yards on the missed field goal. So, yeah, it'll be fun. That's a big-time college atmosphere. I'm really looking forward to it.
I asked you earlier about the Big 12 and how all this, almost like a pot of gumbo with the 4 schools that have entered and then the 4 previously, including Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, and BYU. Do you feel like without Texas and Oklahoma, and obviously they have the logos and the brand, and they'll also, a lot of times tell you about that. Do you feel like it's a breath of fresh air?
I guess the political answer would be, oh, no, they're all right. No big deal. But, I mean, if you were to ask the fan bases, especially of the Texas schools, that have had to experience it, I don't think Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, BYU, maybe even UCF and West Virginia and Cincinnati, I don't think that they have the real grasp of what it was like to be. And maybe Houston doesn't either. I mean, Houston hasn't
they're
been
gone,
But, I mean, they of course, they did back in the old Southwest Conference days. There was the Bleacher Gate deal and the politics of the Southwest Conference. But if you're a Texas school, I think you really feel the weight that those programs carried on the league, and probably specifically Texas, if we're being honest. So, the Baylors of the world, the Texas Techs of the world, TCU, Houston maybe to a lesser degree, Oklahoma State. They get it. They know. So I do think that they take a step up in weight class, because if Texas and Oklahoma were the heavyweights of the league and they're now gone, well, now it's an opportunity for those schools and every school in the league to step into that heavyweight category. So, yeah, I think it's I don't know if I want to say it's a breath of fresh air, because I could see somebody grabbing this headline and blasting it on Twitter. But, yeah, I think there is a sense of that. There's a sense of, okay, the heavyweights are gone, whether it was just because of their size, maybe not always their production. And it's, okay, let's replace that. Let's be that heavyweight. Let's be that top team in the Big 12. Let's be that team that every single year the media and fans are expecting us to win the league and be part of the college football playoffs. So, yeah, I do think there's a sense of it for sure.
There was the change with Chris Pesman out as AD as Houston moves forward with what they have in front of them. How much did that shake up the athletic department a little bit? Was that, you hear about, well, maybe that was coming, but what was that like that day when that story popped out?
No, it was a surprise for me. I mean, I kind of keep my nose out of people's business. I don't really get involved with the whole political stuff and all of that stuff. But no, everybody was pretty caught off guard by it. I think it was unexpected for a majority of people. I do keep a pulse on the fan base. And, yeah, there was surprise there. The radio guys, we were surprised. And I think Kelvin Sampson had the best answer for it. He's like, we need a Lewis and Clark. This is a new voyage in college athletics, whether it's NIL, whether it's conference realignment. In football, you have the college football playoff. You have the transfer portal, which is basically glorified free agency in college athletics. Mm-hmm. So it's a new day. And Sampson said that we need a Lewis and Clark. We need somebody who thinks outside the box. We need somebody who's looking into that next voyage in college athletics. So I think they're going to try to be cutting edge with it. Find somebody who does have a vision of the way that the landscape of college athletics is shaping up. A few people that I've talked to, like Yormark type, which I think Yormark does have that vision. I do think he's somebody who has the mindset of, adapting to the college landscape and where it's going. So, yeah, I think that would be a good way to go. Tillman Fertitta, Renu Couture, the leaders of the university, I trust that they'll make a good decision to guide the athletic department for the University of Houston.
Jeremy Branham, sideline analyst, reporter for University of Houston football with me. David Smoke, 365 Sports.